Terence Bud Crawford versus Naoya Inoue. This seems to be the debate of the moment at the beginning of 2024. But there's really three different questions, I think. One is, who's Fighter of the Year 2023? Who is the better fighter? And thirdly, who has the potential to be the better fighter over the course of their whole career? So let's break this down part by part. So who's the Fighter of the Year 2023? Well, I think it's fairly straightforward because Inoue had two fights. They were both title fights. The first was when he beat Stephen Fulton to win two belts at junior feather, super bantam, or whatever you want to call it, but at 122 pounds. And then he went on to unify the belts by beating Marlon Tapales. So he had two title fights, and the second one was a belt unification at 122. Okay, Crawford, on the other hand, had one fight in which he beat Errol Spence at welterweight. Well, we might think that, Crawford Spence had much more build-up, much more hype, and Spence was more, they're both big names, so to speak, so perhaps we give that one fight a little more credit. But it's hard to argue that, a belt defense versus winning a belt and then unifying the titles. In terms of simple accomplishment belt-wise, I think we have to give it to Inoue. But in terms of just who's the better fighter, I would say or who's the more accomplished fighter overall through 2023, I think we definitely have to give it to Bud Crawford. He has defended that welterweight title for 5 years straight, since 2018 when he won. Every single one of his fights has been a title fight, a 12-round title fight, and he has he's fought, big names, so to speak. They've been solid fights. So it's not entirely his, quote unquote, it's not entirely up to Bud that he only fought once in 2023. There's a lot more to that than just say Crawford's desire to have, let's say he said I want two fights in 2023, but he can only make that one happen. That's not on the fighter. That's on the business side of things. That's on the other potential opponents. So it's a tough call in terms of say putting the burden on the fighter for that. But in terms of overall career through 2023, I definitely think that Terence Crawford has solidified himself, and he has just relentlessly defended those welterweight belts. So we can't deny him that commitment to the sport, the commitment to fighting, as they say, big fights, and just mentally to sustain that hunger and that drive and that commitment that it takes to compete and win at a world class level for the solid 5 years since 2018, through COVID, etc., all of the above. I would definitely say overall Terence Crawford is a more accomplished fighter than Inoue. But I still think that in terms of, if we just want to look at 2023 in isolation, whether you think that's valid or not, right? We could question whether that's even valid, but people like to talk about Fighter of the Year. I think we have to give that to Inoue, simply for, stepping into that new division, and in his first fight beating Stephen Fulton, and then in his second fight at that weight, unifying the belts. Okay, so now let's bring up the third question, which is, who has the potential to be the overall better fighter by the end of their career, which is at this point both hypothetical because neither fighter has indicated that they're looking at retirement anytime soon. So to figure that out, I think it's helpful to look at each of their specific fighting techniques in the ring. Okay, so let's look at what they have in common. I would say they're both boxer punchers, which is kind of, the most sort of revered type of fighter in the ring, right? We could say you're either a boxer, meaning you're able to touch and use really crisp technique and move around a lot, and you're not really concerned with power, so you're a boxer, or you're a brawler where you just don't care about defense as much, you just want to get in and land heavy shots. So those are sort of two extreme styles that we use to refer to categorize boxers. But then there's the esteemed boxer puncher, someone who can move in and out deftly and counterpunch hard. So they have both aspects of being a boxer and being a brawler or a puncher. And I think both Inoue and Crawford can be categorized as a boxer puncher, but they're very different in how they go about it. So let's look at Inoue. Now, because he has 25 fights and Crawford has 40 fights, there's a little more footage on Crawford than there is on Inoue, in a sense, right, at the higher level. But from what we can see of Inoue is he's very good at moving in and drawing his opponent. They're both very good at drawing their opponent to attack, and then they counter. The interesting thing about Inoue is he seems to do this initially on a very sort of linear way, like to draw the jab or to use a jab and then counter. But once you start looking at it very closely, he's highly effective with his jab, but then he does actually change angles. But it's very, very subtle the way Inoue changes angles. He does that by just shifting his torso a few degrees one way or the other, or by shifting his head a little bit. He also it seems like he's almost using his head a little bit like bait. Not like too overtly, but just putting his head in exactly the position where his opponent thinks they can land their jab or their straight right, and then he adeptly just takes very small steps to shift the distance and then quickly counter. And what I think is up with Inoue, I don't know for sure, but I think he's far more athletic than he's showing us in the ring, which makes him a very, very mentally disciplined fighter. Because every now and again you'll see a little glimmer of like really I won't call it crazy, but like real interesting, like kind of a finesse athletic move that you go, whoa, what was that? It's like completely not classic technique or anything, but he'll do a little footwork and a little body movement that has you kind of go, oh wow, like just as a sample of his true athleticism to say get away from a punch and position himself to get into a punch. So what that shows me is he's got the athleticism to do that type of boxing, but he's been disciplined, or maybe his trainer, his father, just instilled in him, no, you're gonna stick to this, just stick to, we're gonna work the jab first, and then drop in straight rights, and then your body punch, left hook to the body that he's known for, and then come upstairs with a left hook. If we watch Inoue's knockouts, they're varied, but they're very classic, right? He lands really hard jabs, and then he'll drop in a right hand behind that, and then he'll work that left body shot off. Once his opponent knows that jab right hand could be coming, he'll drop in that body shot. Once the person knows, okay, I need to drop my elbow to block that body shot, then he can come upstairs with that left hook. It's all just very classic and straightforward, and you could even say predictable stuff, but none of his opponents have been able to stop that. And that all has to do with the setup, and then being disciplined enough to just wait, and then wait for the right moment to actually finish his opponent. So, for example, let's look at his most recent fight with Tapalis. He dropped Marlon in, I think, the 4th round, and it looked like, Tapalis could have been done in the next round. And some fighters might have gotten a little bit excited, saying, hey, I'm going to take him out in the 5th. But Inoue did not do that. He didn't go nuts and just try to take out Tapalis. He just remained reserved, stuck to the same sort of boxing, and just stayed behind his jab right hand, and then finally in the 10th, I think it was the 9th or 10th round, he did wind up dropping and finishing Tapalis. But to his credit, I really think a lot of people thought, oh, he's going to get him out in the 5th or the 6th. He didn't go outside of himself, if that makes any sense. He didn't get emotional about it and say, hey, no, excited and I want to finish this guy. He just remained disciplined to his craft, and I'm assuming to the instructions from his corner. Told him, look, just probably just stick with your jab, don't go crazy, just keep working away at this guy. We'll break him down even more, and then he'll be done. Which is how that fight played out. Tapalis is a warrior, and he's no slouch himself. Plus he's a southpaw and a hard hitter. So he was not going to go away easy. So I think Inoue in his corner played that out correctly, But my point being, Inoue showed me that he's incredibly disciplined mentally in that fight. Now, the other thing I want to bring up about Inoue is that there's an extreme subtlety to what he does. So, for example, the jab. Now, Inoue has like a huge variety of jabs, right? Up jab, just feint jabs upstairs and downstairs, all of the above. But I think what he's also doing, and the only people who really know are the people who stood across from him in the ring, because this is something that's not going to get picked up on a camera. We're not going to ever be able to see this from outside the ring. But I think he just varies his jab by a matter of degrees, which gives him like an infinite variation of jabs, right? Because if this is, say a horizontal jab, and this is a vertical jab, right, at 90 degrees, we've got every little bit in between the vertical and the straight horizontal, and maybe even slightly rotated this way for your jab, right? In terms of degrees, think about that. That's almost like an infinite number of jabs right there, if we're just talking about angle of the fist. Now, what if we talk about the target itself? Because I think he's aiming at different parts of his opponent. And I think he tricks them into, by just a matter of inches, where he's going to hit them. So there's that variation also, right? Like, he's not just thinking, most of us just think head and body, and that's kind of it. But I think Inoue's got really pinpoint targets all around, and like I said, I wouldn't know until I was in there standing in front of him what's up, but that's not going to happen. So I think he's varying angle of his fist. I think he's varying his targets in a very subtle way. He's varying his level in a very subtle way too. So what I think is going on is that Inoue has this almost infinite number of jabs he can throw, and so you just never know what is going to come from him. Another thing he can do is just vary the angle of his torso just by subtly rotating at the waist or bending just a little bit. And that changes everything. It changes, as they say, the angle of attack. But these are all super subtle variations that you really gotta take a close look at. And the only other way to know that something's going on, or for me to deduce that, okay, what's going on here, is just from the reaction of his opponents, who you know are very seasoned fighters. If they're getting tagged up like this, and they're that good, like they have all the defensive and offensive skills of a world-class fighter, so there's something else going on that is getting past them, that they have not dealt with before or don't deal with on a regular in the gym. So again, now we can look at, say, Inoue's fight versus Fulton. You could tell that Fulton realized, okay, this, whatever his game plan was, which I'm guessing was maybe to outbox Inoue, since he's saying, hey, there's a small guy coming up, I'll just keep him at the end of my stick. Okay, well that didn't work. So then it looked like Fulton then tried to go to plan B, which was to start moving his upper body a lot and become this mobile target, and then that didn't work. But just the fact that Fulton had to make a dramatic shift, if you watch that fight, you can see there's a dramatic shift in what he's doing, and that still wasn't enough to neutralize and overcome Inoue. So again, what Inoue does is just so subtle. So there's the angle of the fist, the target, his level changing, his torso rotation, and then now of course there's also his footwork, which is also very disciplined and very, very subtle, because he doesn't, it looks sometimes like he's just going straight in and straight out, but he's actually not going just straight in and straight out with his feet. There's also very small angle shifts being created. Now, he doesn't do anything as dramatic as like a Vasily Lomachenko with the pendulum switch steps and whatnot to create those types of bigger angle changes, but what Inoue's doing is creating enough of an angle change to offset his opponent and put himself in a good position. Okay, so that's Inoue in a nutshell. For me, is just he's masterful with the subtlety of the variation of angles in multiple ways, right? With his fist, with the target, with his level, with his torso, and with his feet. Okay, so now let's switch to Terence Crawford. And of course, a big thing we know about Terence is that he can fight from either stance, and that's one thing that's often deemed a big no-no by a lot of boxing trainers. But in Terence's case, since he started doing that as a youngster, and his trainer had the insight to know, I should just let this young man do his thing, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So that to me indicates that Terence sort of grew into this switch step style that he has, and it's just part of him. It's not something he necessarily has to dwell on. It's just part of his natural boxing language, and he doesn't just switch for the sake of switching. He doesn't switch because, oh no, I'm not getting the result I want in orthodox, so I'm going to switch. I think he just flows naturally back and forth from one to the other as he's progressing through the fight. Now, for the Spence fight, of course, he did make he and his team, I assume, made it a conscious decision to stay southpaw, just because I'm sure they saw what they needed to see in terms of being able to get to Spence from that stance, from the double southpaw stance. But my point is, I think that the switch stance, although it could be frowned upon by many, it's just so natural for Terence that it's something, one, that can't completely be taught, and it's secondly, since he started it when he was a kid, it grew into his body. It sort of raised his body as he grew from a boy to teenager to man. He just absorbed that switch hitting stance and that all the techniques that go with it. So now that said, he's also masterful at setting up angles to counter. Same thing that Inoue is masterful at. But the way Bud does it is a lot more I guess you could say, overt, right? Like we can see his body shifts, we can see his counter punches coming around. We can see how he, you know, it's predictable how he could counter to the body or the head, and he does make all those angular shifts with his feet. Complete master at what he does, no doubt. So he's truly an artist. Both men are truly artists at what they do. But now here's the punchline. Because Inoue's angle shifting and counter punching is done on a much more subtle level, I'm going to argue that Inoue has the chance to sort of outlast Terence, if you will, in terms of fighting longevity. Now, it's not quite a fair comparison, right? Because Inoue's 30, Bud Crawford's already 36. So Inoue's probably just coming into his prime right now, and Bud's kind of at his prime. And I mean, the question is, you know, how much more does either man want to accomplish in the ring? You know, is Crawford going to move up to 154 and take on fights at that weight? Is he going to continue to stay and just completely dominate the welterweight division as he's already done since 2018? I mean, it's kind of his call. But my point here is, when you have a counter puncher like Bud that counts on a lot of movement, particularly with the footwork, as they say, as the cliche goes, first thing to go in a fighter is their legs. So should Bud continue on, say, beyond 3 more years, is he going to still have that leg mobility that he's counting on, or that he utilizes now to counterpunch, to set up angles? It's all pretty much, a lot of it is his feet. So my question is, how long can he keep that up? Now, why should he? He doesn't need to even stick around more than another year if he doesn't want to. He could walk away now and have an amazing career. So I'm not advocating that Terence stick around just to test this theory of how long he can keep it up. But I would argue that this style doesn't give him as much longevity as Inoue's style, because Inoue's style is so disciplined, and he's reined in his athleticism, whereas Crawford kind of expresses his athleticism. Probably in still a disciplined way, because I'm sure he could do more showboaty type, he could probably do almost sort of Pernell Whitaker type moves, but he also stays within himself, but his definition is still more movement, particularly with the legs. Inoue, on the other hand, I think is only showing us maybe like 20% of his athleticism. He just expresses it in such subtle ways that it's very hard to pick up on camera. For us to watch on YouTube, it's really hard to figure out what exactly is going on. But I would argue that because that style that he has, or that boxing philosophy, you could even call it, he can last longer in the ring, because he's reined in himself. He and his trainer have reined in what he does in the ring so tightly that he could do that for probably until he's 40, should he choose to. So that's another decade. Now, will he continue to go up in weight? He's already held belts at 4 weight divisions, right? Light flyweight, so 108, and then he skipped flyweight and went up to junior bantam 118, and then junior bantam 115, and then bantam 118, and now I guess super bantam 122, or junior feather, I don't know, whichever one you want to call it, 122. So I could see him going up to 126. I could see him maybe going up to 130. So that's now 6 weight divisions. 135 might be a bit of a reach, because that would indicate to me that he's got to go hit the weights and eat a lot of protein. And I don't know that. While it looks to me like his frame could carry more muscle mass, I don't know that he wants to do that. I don't know how that affects his fluidity and his movement in the ring, and I don't know that if that's something he has his eye set on. Like, does he want to do the Manny Pacquiao? Let me do 8 weight divisions. So then it would be 130, 135, 140. He's already a megastar in Japan, certainly. What more does he need to do? Well, I mean, I could see maybe him growing into another weight division or two. He's not going to get any taller because he's already 30, but he might decide he wants to fill out a bit more, maybe just for himself, or maybe I don't know what his body's telling him to do. Like, I don't know how hard it is for him to make 122, but we'll assume it's not too bad since he moved up last year, 2023. We'll assume he could hold that weight for at least another year. So the question is, does he want to stay at 122 and just continue to defend those belts? Does he see more opportunity at 126 or even 130? I don't know what he and his team have their eyes set on. But I do think his incredible discipline, his incredible mental discipline in the ring during his fight, and just the technical aspect of how he varies his punches and creates angles so subtly, I think that lends itself really well to having a very long career in the ring, should he choose. So, to summarize again, I think fighter of 2023, I feel, is Naoya Inoue, because he had those two title fights, whereas Bud Crawford had one, albeit against a megastar, right, Errol Spence, or at least a boxing star, Errol Spence. Better overall or more accomplished fighter as of right now in January 2024, I definitely have to give that to Terence Crawford, just because he's had that longevity for 5 years of solidly defending the welterweight belts. But who has the potential to have perhaps accomplished the most over the longevity of their career? I'm going to go with Inoue, based on the how reined in his fighting style is in the ring. I don't think he doesn't use all the athleticism. He's very efficient and he only uses as much as he needs, and that will allow him to continue to fight for maybe through until he's 40, should he choose. So that's it. Let me know what you think. What you think of Inoue, what you think of Crawford. Please comment in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching.